Good evening, everybody. I'm Steve Crowley. I'm with the Vermont Chapter of the Sierra Club as a volunteer on the executive committee, and I'm with a team here, Rob Kidd and Suzanne Zelf, who are organize these almost weekly events here, our weekly webinars, our community conversations. And we're excited tonight that we have a somewhat unusual conversation for us. This is going to be about the impacts of wake boats and what possible damage or protection should be happening with wake boats on our small lakes and ponds. With us tonight are three people who are up to their ears in this: Mark Milazzo, Don Griggs, and Jack Widnes. And with that brief introduction, let me just say before I pass it along to Mark that this is being recorded. So if you want to share it with people later on, that'd be great. Rob will put this up on our website and share the address. And if you if you want to keep your video off, you won't be your face won't be on the screen. We also ask that if you're not the speaker at the moment, that you keep your mic on mute. That's really helpful with a big group because the background noise gets to be pretty intense. So thank you, everybody, for going to mute. And our format is going to be a presentation by Mark, Don, and Jack in the first, say, half hour or so, and then it'll be open discussion, question and answer. If you have questions that you want to log in along the way, throw them in the chat. Our speakers may see them there. They may not. We'll get to, if they don't, we'll get to them later on. And so that's it. So with that, let me pass it along to Mark. And welcome.
First of all, I'd like to thank Rob and the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club for letting us present today. And we appreciate all the folks that are making the time this evening to be a part of this call. In terms of an agenda, I'm going to start with some introductions of the speakers. Briefly talk a little bit about the Vermonters for Wakeboat Environmental and Public Safety Awareness Committee, kind of what our goals are, give you some definitions around wake boats, wakeboarding, and wake surfing. From there, we'll move into a presentation by Don Griggs. Don's on a lake up in Maine, and he's been gracious to help us quite a bit. From that, we'll move over to Jack Widnes, who will talk about the growing chorus across North America, around wake boats, wake surfing, and wakeboarding, what some of the common themes are. And then we'll wrap up and we'll go to Q&A. So just in terms of introductions, again, my name is Mark Milazzo. I was born and raised in Vermont. I live on Peacham Pond in Peacham. It's about a 325-acre lake. I spent most of my career in the technology space, managing large projects, and the last probably 20 years or so building partnerships, go-to-market partnerships in the technology business. But I'm retired, happy to say, and I spend my days working on my cabin, visiting with my daughter and granddaughter in England, and working on my home brewing skills. Don, again, as I mentioned, comes from Keyser Lake up in Maine. He's been on that lake since 1969. He's a part of the Keyser Lake Watershed Association. Doing a lot of great stuff up there. I've only recently got to know Don, but he's got a lot of activities going up there in terms of the watershed and the lake itself. I think the one that interested me the most, he was telling us about the other day, they're doing lake sediment cores, and they're analyzing those. And I guess it's appropriate that he's an electrical engineer. Jack comes from Lake Raponda in southern Vermont. He's a Vermont resident. He's been vacationing up here all his life. He comes to us with a scientific professional background, and he's co-authored a number of medical peer-reviewed publications. So as we were preparing, the three of us, for this presentation, we went off and looked at your Sierra Club mission statement, and we wanted to see how that aligned with what we're doing. And I think there's a great alignment. If you took a look at some of the common themes: environment, responsible use of the Earth's ecosystem, educate, and most importantly, take action. So in addition to that, we also met with a person from one of your chapters up in Minnesota. There's a blog here that you can go read. I won't go into it right now, but he was, again, very gracious in sharing what they're doing up there. Same issues. They're a little bit ahead of us, and they've got some important research coming out, a study coming out. I think it's in late summer or early fall, which they'll work, to carry into hopefully in some type of legislative action around this wake boats. So who are we? Well, we're just a group of citizens that have come together. We either live on ponds and lakes, or we live near them. I think we all, we're trying to get a better understanding of what are the issues concerned with wakeboarding and wake boats, and it's pretty significant. You'll see as we go into it. The impact on public safety, lake shorelines, and within the surrounding environment. So it's not only above the water and the shoreline, but it's also, as Don will talk a little bit, what's going on under the water from the results from these boats. So what we're working to do, we've spent a number of months, again, as a group coming together, studying the issues. And part of our activity now is to kind of build a coalition of lake associations, people that use these waterways, and other interested parties like the Sierra Club to help us address the impact of this sport. And we're also partnering with other organizations in other states and there are a number of states that are analyzing the impact of this activity. So some definitions just around a wake boat. Basically they either have ballast. They have ballast in them. They have hydrofoils and hull technology, and it's all been developed to create an enhanced wake. And you'll see that in some of the pictures. Wakeboarding, one of the sports that takes place behind a wake boat, is, I guess, related to water skiing. Basically, a rope, and you've got a short board with foot bindings. You're crossing the wake, doing aerial maneuvers. Wake surfing is a little bit different. It's where in which a rider trails behind the boat. They'll probably come up the use of a tow rope, but the rope gets dropped, and they start surfing. They're riding the face of the wave. I think of surfing. So I'm a visual person, so I thought I created or got some pictures here. On the left-hand side, you can see they're wake surfing. You can see all of the folks in the top left side. They're on the side of that boat trying to create as big a wave as possible. The bottom one is also somebody wake surfing. If you go to the right-hand side, that's wakeboarding. You'll note the rope, and you get a sense for, in that top right-hand picture, the size of the waves we're talking about. If you look at that picture, you see how close they are to shore. So Jack's going to talk about this a little bit more, but I just wanted to cue up. Here are the number of states that are dealing with this issue now, and we also have one province in Canada, Quebec, that's done several studies on this, and they're also working to address the issue. So this is not a Vermont problem. Wake boats, and wake surfing and wakeboarding are fast-growing sport. And so a number of states are starting to become very concerned, or are concerned with it, and are starting to do something about it. So today's discussion will try to cover why there's so much in wake enhanced water activity, environmental impact to, again, the waterways, the shorelines, the wildlife, the spread of invasive species because of the ballast, which Jack will cover a little bit, the public safety concerns, some great studies out there of people getting knocked off their docks, getting knocked off their boats because of these boats. And then we'll talk a little bit about the activities going on across the US and Canada to address these problems. That moves us to Don. So Don, I'll stop sharing and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, I've been working on this issue for about 4 years, and I'm on the board of the Teaser Lake Watershed Association, and I just wanted to orient you as to where we are. This is a map of our watershed. We're in Lovell, Maine. It's a 56 square mile watershed, 20 miles east of Mount Washington. Most everybody's heard of Mount Washington. The watershed is 92% forested, and it's really a fairly pristine lake. There aren't any major pollution sources around the lake, so our water is very good. Unfortunately, wake boats are messing us up. So we've become very concerned about the impact of these boats. We're working with other lake associations to get their observations. We're seeking ways to mitigate and control inappropriate activities by establishing guidelines and education, and ultimately some legislation. So what's the threat from these boats? We're especially concerned about the large wakes, which are 3 feet or more in height. Erosion, degradation of water quality, danger to small craft on the water, can cause upset, injure boaters, damage to the watercraft, damage to watercraft at anchor or docks, slamming boats into the docks. We've had many of those instances. Breaking mooring lines, upset or damage to aquatic life, especially nesting loons, and I'm going to show you that. Danger to swimmers, and we're concerned about other boat operators and property owners becoming so irritated to the point that they may confront or take counteractions. We don't want any gunfights on the lake. An additional threat comes from slow-speed boating in shallow water, where the propeller wash interacts with the lake bed and stirs up sediment. And I'll show you how that works. I wanted to show this couple of pictures here. We have 10 loon nesting platforms deployed on our lake and on our ponds. We have trail cameras on some of these nests to watch what's going on. And here is a trail camera that happened to have captured a wake boat wave coming at our one of our nesting platforms. And you can see that it tilted it up severely where the eggs could roll into the water, or the wake could just wash right through the nest and flush out the eggs as well. The primary threat zone, I'll call it slow speed boating, and you'll see why I use slow speed. Wake boats create the maximum impact because of their wake enhancement capabilities and their slow speed necessary for wake surfing. Now, there's 2 aspects to slow speed power boating. One is the wake creation, and the other one is the bottom scouring, and I will cover both of these. Okay, the types of boats making wakes on our lake. First, we have wind or muscle-powered boats, and they have no wake to speak of. Boats with a little bit of wake, 4 to 12 inches, low-power boats, less than 10 horsepower, personal watercraft, jet skis, boats with medium wakes, 1 to 2 feet, general runabout boats if they're going fast, pontoon boats, and boats with large wakes, 2 to 4 feet, are wake boats. And we also have general runabout boats operating in the 6 to 12 mile an hour range. All boat wakes vary significantly depending on the speed, as I will show. The boat design and loading also influences the wakes. Now here's a chart that shows boat speed versus wake height. The height is shown on the vertical axis and the speed on the horizontal axis. So you can see there between 6 and 12 miles an hour, there is a peak here. At less than 6 miles an hour, we're in the kind of the no wake, go slow mode. And if you're more than 12, the boats begin to plane. And when they start planing, more of the boat hull is out of the water, and therefore they're plowing less and creating less wake. Now, we're especially concerned about these wake boats. They're designed to make large wakes, 4 feet or more, and they support the new support of wake surfing. Although they're very expensive, they can cost up to $300,000. They are proliferating, and we've had a lot of complaints about these large wakes. And you get an even greater impact if more than one of these boats is operating in the same area at the same time. We're not as concerned about wake boats per se, but how and where they're used. These boats have the capability to be operated in ways and locations that cause damage, injury, and erosion. The nature of boat wakes. They're formed by two actions of a boat. The displacement wakes, boats that are plowing the water with the bow, and planing wakes, the transverse waves from the stern and the propellers. Once formed, the wakes decay as the distance from the sail line to the negative 0.38, as I will show. They decrease by half for every 8-fold increase in distance from the sail line. The sail line is the path of the boat. Now here are some graphs of wake boat decay. The top line, well, on the vertical axis again is wave height, and the horizontal axis is the distance from the vessel. So the blue line represents the wake decay from a wake surfing boat. This is empirical data. This is not calculated. The next line down is from wakeboarding, and the bottom line is from wake skiing or just cruising. So you can see the nature of the decrease in the magnitude of these wakes as it goes on out. And this graph goes out to 500 feet. That little dotted line there is the criteria that the people that made this study, which are the folks in Georgia, determined that was an acceptable height of a wake that comes ashore or into a marina or against a dock. And that's about, I don't know, 0.6 or 0.7 feet. Other studies have used 1 foot as an acceptable amount. Here is another picture of a wake boat. It's got a little scale on there showing that this is a 4.2 foot wake. This is from a Malibu 22 foot wake boat, just as an example. Now, just in case you thought that was bad, look at this one. This is called a Gigawave electric wake boat. This is an all-electric wake boat with two 300 horsepower motors, and this boat can create 8-foot high wakes. And you can see this guy surfing here in the curl. This is so big that it creates a curl, just like an ocean wave. Now, this boat in this photograph, I think, is a prototype. It's not a production model. So hopefully these monsters won't be around in any numbers for a good while. So what should we do about addressing these wakes? Well, we've decided to create boating guidelines concerning the wakes on our lake to educate boaters with signs at public launch, instructions by our marina staff, and they're very good at this. We have a lake patrol that's on the lake on busy times that they also help get the word out. Publish newsletter. We also document occurrences of wake-caused erosion, damage, and safety issues, and we seek support from other lake associations. And petition Maine legislators concerning these wake boats, everything from banning wake boats on some lakes, which are simply too small or too shallow, or when and where this kind of wake surfing is appropriate. Now let's consider the related threat, propeller wash on the lake bottom. And this graphic shows what I mean here. Here's a wake boat with its propeller pointing down and the prop wash cone propagating to the bottom. This water jet can have a devastating effect on the lake bottom and water quality by scouring the bottom, resuspending sediment, especially phosphorus, destruction of aquatic vegetation and water critters and their habitat. Now, the wake boats, as I mentioned, have this 20-degree angle on the prop shaft and another 15 degrees in a bow up posture, so the thrust of the propeller wash is about 30 degrees down. The velocity of the jet is proportional to the propeller pitch and the propeller RPMs, and the jet wash speed decays linearly with distance. Now here's a graph that shows the jet velocity on the vertical axis and the boat speed on the horizontal axis. And you can see again that the maximum velocity occurs at about 9 miles an hour. If you're going much slower than that, then the jet speed is less, mainly because the RPMs are less. And if you go faster than that, you subtract the speed of the boat from the jet. So that reduces the magnitude. Now, this chart's the one we just looked at on the water jet velocity. Here's the one we looked at earlier about the wake height. And if I superimpose these, look what happens here. The maximum wake generation speed and the maximum bottom scouring both occur at a speed of about 9 miles an hour. The primary boating activity associated with this speed is wake surfing. So the wake surfing can have the greatest adverse impact on the shoreline, docks, other boats, as well as on the bottom if in shallow water. Now here is a short video I'm going to show you. This is my Sea Ray boat. This is an 18-foot runabout boat with a 130 horsepower engine, and with one person in the boat, me, and another compatriot standing on a pontoon boat holding an underwater camera. So look at what happens here. Here's the camera going up. If you look carefully, you will see the motor. There's lots of bubbles. Now wait just a moment here, and you'll see a sediment cloud rising. See this sediment cloud rising here? And you're going to start to see bits and parts of bottom vegetation starting to float into view here. And this thing plunking around on the left is a turbidity meter. The turbidity was tenfold over the start. Okay, so that's just my own personal demonstration of what this jet wash can do. And this, again, this is a little rinky-dink boat compared to these wake boats, which have 4 times the horsepower, bigger propellers, and so on. So our Keezer Lake Watershed Association has created guidelines. We want wake surfing activities to be operated at least 500 feet from shore. Other activities that create wakes in the 2 to 3 foot range be operated at 300 feet from shore. And further, no such slow speed activities should occur in water less than 20 feet deep due to the propeller wash scouring of the bottom. Now, my last slide shows a flyer that we have created, and we have given this distribution far and wide, and several other lake associations have asked for permission to use it. And what they did was to swap out our map for their map. So on one side of this, it's a very substantial flyer, waterproof and all that. So on one side, it shows the concerns and the effects and the causes of these wakes. On the other side is what can you do to help? And here's a map of our lake with the yellow area indicating those areas that are 500 feet from shore and in water over 20 feet deep. And you'll notice at the bottom there, what we call the lower bay. It's a nice body of water, but it averages about 10 feet deep. So it's seriously inappropriate for wake boats to be operating down there. Okay, that is my presentation. There are more technical versions of it, but I think that is the essence, and I hope that is helping you understand this problem. Okay, back to you, Jack.
Good.
So I'm going to pick up where Don left off and with our wakeboat analysis and concerns. And as Mark mentioned, I'll be talking about the growing chorus, that is a number of states in North America. And some of the themes that Don touched on, I'll be touching on again. And to reiterate some of what Don had said is that there is a place for recreational wake surfing that can be enjoyed in a safe manner, and that is in deeper water far from shore. And so what follows, I'll be providing some of the additional things to have you think about in terms of awareness for where is appropriate and where is inappropriate for this activity. So Vermont's not alone in terms of its concern. This is an ever-growing concern, and as Mark had shows, these are the 15 states that we're aware of. There may be others in which the states are considering various management of wake boats and these wake enhancing activities. These are indicated with a star. Most of these are in the north. And as you can see, there are places elsewhere in the world, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, where these issues take place. And in our 3 New England states, there's the additional concern or situation where we've had glaciers here many years ago, and these scoured the earth at the time. So many of our lakes are narrow, which accentuates some of the problems that we have with wake boats. So to reiterate, these are the concerns that these various states are considering. Don had mentioned some that Maine is looking at. They include environmental, adverse effects, economic, and safety, and I'll be touching on all of these perhaps in a slightly different way than Don did. Fortunately, there's been a growth in the number of scientific output of studies on the impacts of wake boats and their enhanced wakes, and this really is something that states will be able to apply in their thinking as to whether they're needed or not. They're peer-reviewed studies, and these are just a few of the ones that are been done. Peer review means that they've been usually in a journal, and so they've been subject to experts before they're actually published. And there's non-peer review articles as well, quite a number. One of the ones that Don had mentioned, and I'll focus on again, is the Georgia study, which has just been published in 2021 about wake boat impact and analysis on 2 lakes in Georgia that was commissioned by the lake associations there. If you put all of these studies together, you come up with something similar to what Don was suggesting, is that wake boat operation, proper operation, should occur 500 to 1,000 feet from shore and in greater than 20 feet of water. This is not something that's held by the water sports industry, which advocates a 200 foot, but they are alone in recommending that. Well, what are the public's concerns? This is data taken from the Georgia study. And again, these are homeowners in lake associations, and shown here are the responses of 450 of these in terms of what are the concerns about wake boats. Only 11% had no concerns. Others were concerned about erosion and shore damage, negative effects on other boats from the wakes, and boating safety issues. So there's relatively few, at least in this one study, that this isn't a concern. Next, in terms of the environmental impacts potentially from wake boats and enhanced wakes, Don's done a good job talking about and illustrating the first 3 of these that are listed here. I'm going to spend the time on this slide talking about one that I think is very important, which impacts water quality. That is aquatic invasive species, which can be transported in the ballast tanks. The little cartoon that's shown here shows you a cross-section to the back of a boat showing these ballast tanks with their drainages. And as you can see below the drain, the little blue squiggly lines, that's the water that can't be removed from the ballast tanks. And because of that, this water can harbor macroscopic and microscopic invasive species, such as Eurasian milfoil and mussel veligers, which are little embryos. Now, these tanks are large in these boats, as Don had mentioned. They hold between 2,000 and 5,000 pounds, which is about how much a sedan automobile weighs. And the concern is if you have a boat entry with day trippers, that is, people that come in with wake boats, let's say they've been on Lake Champlain or the Connecticut River in Vermont, where there are lots of invasive species. They harbor this in their ballast tank. They come in for the day, they fill up, they do their thing, then they empty their ballast tank. Well, the problem is there's the opportunity for invasive species to be dispersed in that lake. And this is not something that people that are inspecting boats, the greeters, can detect. So this is really a major problem, especially for lakes that don't have invasive species where this can occur. In terms of the economic impacts of wake boats, as Don had mentioned, there can be damage to the shoreline, property damage to docks, boat lifts, etc. And one of the individuals offered a comment from the Georgia study, and they said, "We were visiting friends in the lake. We were in our boat, and a wake boat came by, and the wake was so large that it crashed our boat into the seawall. Ultimately, this led to our boat sinking and being declared a total loss." So there are economic consequences of this. There's also safety consequences that Don had alluded to, and this in part may be related to the weight of the heavy stern causing the bow to rise, making visibility difficult, and thus increasing the chance of significant injury risk, death to boaters and swimmers. And this has been documented in a couple of ways. In 2019, the United States Coast Guard recreational boating report indicated that large wakes can cause severe adverse conditions on especially canoes, kayaks, sailboats, at risk for being swamped. And that this is the fourth most common accident recorded in 2019 that resulted in 45 deaths and 124 injuries. Similar data have been reported in Oregon, where they looked at data from 2010 to 2017, and 12% of all the accidents at that period were related to the force of wakes, and 3 people died. So safety is an issue. And in terms of the public's perception of safety, again, from the Georgia study, 75% of the respondents of 467 indicated that they thought safety was indeed a concern. The same group, when asked about whether they thought they supported management of wake boats and their wakes, 82% in the Georgia study were concerned about that and recommended that. I'd like to end by telling you of an email I received just in the last couple of weeks from a Vermonter about their recent experience on a Vermont lake with wake boats. This individual said, "I was slipping into the lake from my 20-foot dock late in the afternoon for a swim. A wake boat, a term unfamiliar to me, passed by at least 200 feet offshore. The swells of this wake were the largest I had seen in my 24 years on the lake. As the wakes crashed against my steep shoreline, I speculated that the new hazards these waves created was undoubtedly disruptive to waterfowl habitat as well. Walking back from my dock, I noted new, raw dirt exposed at the base of the century-old, badly undercut white pine. For about 2 decades, heavily laden party boats have accelerated erosion. and now we have wake boats. So how might you be able to help with this issue? Well, tonight we tried to make you more aware of the impacts of wake boats on the environment in the lakes where you enjoy and recreate, and the public safety aspects of this. We'd ask you to send us your wake boat stories, spread the word, get involved, contact your legislators. And so I'd like to now thank you for your attention and pass this off to Mark before we begin our Q&A.
Thanks, Jack. I put something in the chat window. It talks about the story that Jack was just relating to, and it's about Lake Fairleigh. And I think it's really eye-opening. I encourage you. I won't go into it now, but it's a person wrote an article there, or I don't know, some blog in Thetford, but this wake boat went by this pontoon boat that was carrying this elderly couple. They were out for a cruise, and the water literally came crashing over the boat. These folks got drenched. So I encourage you to read that article because I think it really brings it home to what the impact is going to be in Vermont. This sport is growing like crazy, and so again, our group is working to to try to see how to best address this and make recommendations. And as Jack said, we'd love to have you get involved in whatever way, spread the word, just become aware about it. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Stephen.
Great. Well, thanks so much. It's learned a lot just now. There's a lot in there. I wonder, we've got a lot of people on here. It might be interesting if people who are here and who spend some time on any Vermont or any other states, lakes and ponds, if you want to throw in the chat what lake or pond you spend time on and whether you've seen wake boats as an issue at that pond. So it'd be interesting to see. But with that, go ahead and do that in the chat. And I see there's one question that's been posted already from Suzanne. I saw Jim asked about slides and Rob responded. So we'll check with Mark, Don, and Jack to see how they feel about sharing their slides, which Rob usually sends out with the recording link soon, maybe as soon as tomorrow. But Suzanne Suzanne, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah. When you were talking before about the multiple boats, wake boats, what happens when wake boats paths cross? What happens? I'm thinking of when waves go. They can either go up and crash up, or depending on how the wave curls, one wave can actually subduct the other, and then that energy is going all the way, channeling all the way down in that direction down. So do you know what happens when that happens? Does it turn things up more? Or just in general, what happens when multiple boats and their paths cross and the waves path and all that chaos ensues?
Don, you want to take that? I think you're probably in the best position.
Okay, you sort of have two questions there. One of them is, what if you have multiple boats out running around in circles or however they're doing it? The wake of one boat can add to one that's already there and actually double the height of the wave. Or if you're in the valley of one and a peak comes of another, then they cancel out and you have nothing. So the real danger is when they double up. And what you get is a violent, turbulent situation in the water when you have multiple wake boats or any boats that create wakes. Wake boats are the worst because the wakes are the biggest. So you could generate a 7-8 foot crest that shows up in the water with these multiple boats. Now, the other question you have is how does the force of the energy from these wakes go down? And it does go down, but it's much more limited unless you're in shallow water. And I'm not talking about the prop jet. but just a boat running across the water in shallow water, even if it's going very fast, does have an impact on the bottom, depending on the depth again. And if you're in really shallow water, probably for these big boats, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'd say certainly 5 or 6 feet, there is an impact on the bottom.
Thanks, Don.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Let's see. I'm not sure how to pronounce, but Lo Sapio. You have a question about homeowners associations, and on your lake, it looks like your homeowners association is populated with wakeboaters.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we live on a private lake in the center of our HOA. It's about 800 acres big, but it has 3 bays where we don't allow any type of skiing or wakeboating. If you take the size of those bays out, you're talking about a 240 acre lake, basically, where these boats are allowed. The lake has a history of outstanding fishing, which is slowly going away. I'm sorry, rapidly going away. These waves are starting to encroach on breeding grounds and so forth. The board is made up of wakeboat owners. The majority of our governance here is done by wakeboat owners. We have actually had the support of the WSIA in here giving away raffle items or free items at wakeboat supporting parties. We are so stuck with what to do that people are starting to consider moving out of this association. And it seems like there's nothing we can do about it. There are 63 wake boats on this small lake right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So I don't know if you can offer any type of help, but I know because it's an HOA and it's a private lake, enters into maybe a different situation than you guys are talking about. But
what state are you in?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to our Vermont talk. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
How about Vermont? Or maybe I have a question for our presenters. I guess with Keyser Lake, the question would be, how do you manage? Is it the Lake Association that manages all this, or is it the state? Who makes the decisions there at Keyser Lake?
In Maine, the state owns all of the water, lock, stock, and barrel. You can't make regulations. You can't do anything. You can't change buoys. You can't do anything unless it's done by the state. And Maine has an IF&W, which is, I forgot, Fish and Wildlife guys. They have very limited ability to change anything about the lakes. They might be able to change the maximum horsepower from 6 horsepower to 8 horsepower or something like that. But everything else goes to the legislature, full course, both houses, signed by the governor. So it's a long, arduous process to make anything happen. But the state does own the water. Now, if that's completely different than North Carolina, then I'd say North Carolina's got one really tough nut to crack there. I don't have any suggestions on how to do that.
Yeah, we saw that. We saw that in some of the studies. I think it was a couple other lakes in North Carolina, and I don't remember which they were off the top of my head, but it is a challenge. And again, the sport's growing so rapidly, and the rules and the regulations and how things have, what you have to do to change these regulations, as Don says, vary from state to state. So I think having spent a few years in South Carolina and knowing a little bit about the South, I think I would try to get a hold of the folks from the Georgia study and see what they do and what they recommend. I think that was, well, I guess that was, of all the studies, that was the one that fascinated me the most, because I saw that, I think of, Georgia, and people are going to say, hey, let's let the boats go on and keep doing what they're doing. But here's a bunch of people that said, no, this isn't good. People are getting hurt. Boat property's getting damaged. So I guess if I was in your shoes, I think I'd contact them and start there. What we've done is Vermont's a little bit different, and our culture is a little bit different here. And I think, again, the group is growing, the impact is growing, or the actions coming together trying to deal with this are growing. So I think we've got a kind of a different road than you. But I definitely contact the Georgia people and see what they have to say.
Yeah,
May I
Wallace.
speak?
Yeah, Wallace.
My name is Wallace Bruce. I am from Lake Raven in Northeast Georgia, and I'm part of the group that conducted the study that you're discussing. And we are pleased to be invited to join your group and hope that we can learn from you how to implement means to control these boats, because we are not having very much success with the owner of the lakes and are trying to pursue legislative approaches. And so we will appreciate any guidance and knowledge that you might give us in pursuing that. But we are the ones who did that study last September that determined that at least a 500-foot buffer is what's necessary for reasonable wave attenuation when in surfing mode.
Right. In Montreal, the studies out of Canada said almost 1,000 feet. So yeah, definitely, we're definitely willing to work with other groups, and people have been really good. Other groups have been really good for us in terms of sharing information. We've created a database.
Can I mention one more thing?
Sure.
So we got some other people with hands up, but go ahead.
We had a study proposed by the North Carolina State. It was going to be an entirely comprehensive study here at a very good cost to the community, and the HOA voted it down. So that's the type of issues that we're coming up with. I assume they're afraid of what the study was going to show.
Well, here in Vermont, we have a somewhat different situation. Jim Maislin has his hand up. Jim may offer some inside information here. Jim, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. A couple of things. We're talking about several different things here. I mean, all with the same purpose, but you're talking about basically what we're trying to regulate and how we'd regulate it, and whether it happens through lake associations or, voluntary associations, or by an act of the legislature. And we're fairly fortunate here that the legislature does have considerable power and authority should we choose to act on it. We'll begin the second year of a biennium in January, and we'll have basically 18 weeks to do our good deeds, and then we're done. And we'll have to start over if it doesn't succeed. But I'm greatly confident that there'll be legislation introduced, and it'll be available, sometime in the fall in draft form for people to see what's proposed. This evening has been exceedingly helpful. Lake Fairley, incidentally, is one of my towns. Or Lake Fairley is in one of my towns, two of my towns. And so, where was I going here? We're fairly fortunate. We already have regulation on the books regarding jet skis, and we may just start with that and add to that. As we have learned this evening, wake boats are far more destructive than jet skis, and it'll only get worse, I suppose. So I don't need to go on and on, except to say Vermont we have nothing on the books right now regarding wake books, but we have an advantage on how we can approach and take care of it. And I hope sincerely that we're successful, even if we don't get all we want in the first pass. Thank you.
I could say that some years ago, the Vermont Sierra Club was very much involved in an effort through the Water Resources Board, which sort of dates it because that board doesn't exist anymore. But they used to be the authority that would set rules, and they had pretty broad authority to set rules for the use of lakes and ponds. and they established quiet lakes where,
Right.
they set horsepower limits or speed limits or on certain parts of the lake or within a certain distance. So we have quite a few lakes in Vermont that do not allow powerboats at all.
Right.
But I know that transferred. I'm not sure if it transferred. A lot of their rulemaking authority went to the Agency of Natural Resources. But the legislature is always in charge one way or the other.
I'd like to thank Dr. Representative Maitland for joining us tonight. And what we're trying to do is to get ahead of the issue, Jim. Vermont is not in the situation that you heard about in North Carolina, nor in Georgia, but we see the handwriting on the wall. And we'd like to get ahead of things before they really get out of hand, especially on our much smaller lakes, much narrower and shallower lakes, so that we can prevent these issues from becoming even greater problems, and not necessarily to ban wake boats from where they could be used, but to use them properly. And so, advice from you as well in terms of how to go about doing that would be, most welcome.
Well, we'll see where we end up, As I said, this evening has been very, very helpful, and it's time for other people to have something to say, I think.
I see that Paul has a question here about invasive species. I guess this is regardless of where you are on the lake. If you're 500 or 1,000 feet from shore, you can still have this problem. Paul, do you want to address that?
I'm asking the question because I'm really totally ignorant as to how you can possibly go about assuring that invasive species aren't being transported from one lake to the other. We vacation in the Adirondacks, and the lake that we go to, they forbid anything coming into the lake because of that concern. And it just sounds that if you have these day trippers, that's a constant concern as to how do you prevent contamination from one lake to a more pristine lake.
That was the question of the point that I was raising, is we don't have ways to do that. There's not a way to avoid that currently, and it's a constant problem. And we spend, thousands of dollars in Vermont to try to prevent AIS, and this is such an obvious way that they can be spread, that can be dealt with, and there's no scientific way to guarantee that you've eliminated AIS and going from lake to lake. When you put a new wake boat in a lake and it stays there forever, well, it's not an issue, but that's not what happens. And this is something for Jim that I hope you'll pay attention to. If we're going to work on this issue, Paul, we really need to think about this important question that you're raising.
So can you forbid the boats from discharging their bilges into the lake as they withdraw the boat?
How do you do that? I mean, one solution would be to not have them go in the lake, as you suggested. I'm serious. You're laughing. Why?
No. Listen, I'm not arguing. I think that's great, but I mean, I can't imagine how that's going to fly politically.
Yeah, I guess I'd add that, it's great that Jim is shown up for or come to this presentation. I mean, I remember back to the jet ski, the discussions around that and all the action. And that got pretty nasty. And this one's probably going to get nasty and get tough too. But I think given the time where we are in Vermont and the concern about the environment, and on our particular lake, we keep stats of all the boats that came into the lake from our greeter program. And we saw a significant increase in paddle boards, kayaks, and canoes with COVID-19. So, it's just, we have to come together and solve this. And we're going to need help from the legislature and from the state government to do this. And it's going to be a tough battle, but I'm pretty confident we're gonna make good progress.
All right, how many folks here on the call tonight are in Vermont here. Maybe if you could do the thumbs up there in your reactions panel to how many people here are Vermonters? See a few hands up, but it looks like people are from really all over the place. Oh, great. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good to see. Good to see. So there you go, Jim. There's your mandate right there.
That's all right. For what it's worth, I grew up in a canoe. Just, my parting 10 cents for the evening.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah. Well, I wonder if any of we have just a few minutes left here. Joanne has offered to describe the legislative journey in Oregon with anybody that's interested. So, Joanne, do you want to put your contact information in the chat there so somebody could find you?
I will do that right now. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. We just have a couple of minutes. I wonder if Jack, Mark, and Don, if you have any closing comments.
Well, I'll start off and then turn it over to Jack and Don. First of all, I'd like to thank Don. He's not from Vermont, but he's helping us. He's ahead of us on the curve on this, and we really appreciate all the work and help he's given us. But I think this is just one where we all got to come together and get involved. And I think it's going to be tough, but I think our group has a game plan that we're pulling together on how we're going to deal with it. And again, with having people like Jim involved, that's going to help us. Jack?
I'd like to say that we'd like to have wakeboarding be done in a safe and enjoyable way, and we've heard that we can not have that happen. And I think we'd like to hear stories, have people send us their stories. Contact us if your groups are interested in what we're trying to promote here in Vermont, and work with us. And I think together this is going to be something that the public, as Mark indicated, is going to be up against a very strong adversary with these deep pocket wakeboat groups. And I think most Vermonters that I talk to and know of would like to preserve the water quality and what we have here in Vermont. And these wakeboats in the small, shallow lakes in particular that are narrow, this is not being done, and we'd like to see this being managed one way or the other.
Mark, I'd like to make the closing comment that at least Mark and Jack and I are aware of the study, the major study, I think it's worth several $100,000, that the Minnesota people have done that's due out, as Mark said, a little later in the summer or early fall. And the reason it's been delayed is because they were trying to get a first-class peer review so that it is bulletproof to these water sports people who have, a team of lawyers ready to jump on any state or any municipality that's trying to implement any kind of wake surfing regulation. So once we get that, then I think it's the time to launch into legislative and other avenues to try to get something moving here. In the meantime, we just continue to build the case.
Cool.
We go to Rob Kidd now. Rob. Thank you very much to our presenters.
Yes, thank you very much for Don, Jack, and Mark. I appreciate the conversation. As many people do know, we've been hosting these virtual conversations since the start of the pandemic as a way just to connect our members with the different issues and raise awareness of things that are happening. We are going to continue these conversations virtually, but in a short time, we're going to figure out how to maybe do a combination of it where it's probably a hybrid where we may have some in-person actions, but we kind of like doing this so people aren't driving all across the state or all across the country to come just for a particular meeting. So I appreciate those who joined us, but we plan on continuing this. So just our next one scheduled as next Wednesday, Walking Home Trail Stories. It's a book by Celia Riker. It's about hiking the long trail and her combination of history, intertwining the different stories on that. So it's a little bit different of a conversation that we're having this time. But anyway, all of them get posted on our website. You can see there at the bottom, sierraclub.org/Vermont. All of them are going to be posted on there. And those who registered with this, I'll forward the link to this conversation so you can share it with everybody else once I do have it posted. So, but also, anybody have any topic suggestions, please email me. Thanks to Jack for contacting me about doing this conversation. This is a brand new issue for me. I immediately looked up and see what the Sierra Club position was on it. And technically, Sierra Club National doesn't have a position yet, but our Minnesota chapter has done that great work of the article you shared earlier. And the Sierra Club, we're looking into it, and and my partners in a lot of the Vermont environmental community are now aware of this. So we're hope to spread the word on this to prevent this from being a problem. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And that's going to be the end of the conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.